Hey there, Roothaven Grounds community. You know that feeling when you stumble onto something in your garden that just works so incredibly well, you can't wait to tell everyone about it. Well, that's exactly what happened to me with charged biochar, and I'm not exaggerating when I say my plants responded like they'd been given some kind of botanical superfood. Let me take you back to where this all started. I'd been using plain biochar in my beds for about a year with decent results, but nothing that made me jump up and down. Then I learned about charging biochar with biological reactors, and honestly, I was skeptical. Another gardening trend, right? But what happened next completely changed how I approach soil building, and I think it's going to revolutionize your garden too. Before we dive into the how, let me paint you a picture of the results because they were honestly shocking. My tomato plants, which usually produce steadily throughout the season, exploded with fruit. I'm talking about plants that were so loaded down I had to add extra stakes mid-season. The leaves were this deep, rich green I'd never seen before, and the fruits themselves were larger and more flavorful than anything I'd grown previously. But it wasn't just the tomatoes. My peppers developed thicker stems and more branching. My leafy greens grew so vigorously I was giving bags away to neighbors. Even my notoriously finicky cucumbers, which usually struggle in my clay-heavy soil, thrived like they were in some kind of hydroponic setup. The difference was visible within 3 weeks of application, and it just kept getting better. Here's the thing about biochar that most people don't realize when they first start using it. Plain biochar is essentially charcoal made specifically for soil application. It's incredibly porous, like a sponge made of carbon, with millions of tiny spaces that can hold nutrients and provide habitat for beneficial microorganisms. Think of it as creating a luxury apartment complex in your soil, but here's the catch. When you first make or buy biochar, those apartments are empty. Applying uncharged biochar directly to your soil can actually cause a temporary nutrient tie-up. The biochar acts like a sponge, soaking up available nutrients and leaving your plants scratching their heads, wondering where all the food went. This is why charging your biochar before application is absolutely critical, and using a biological reactor takes that charging process to an entirely different level. Now, let me tell you about the biological reactor system I used, because this is where the magic really happens. A biological reactor in this context is essentially a controlled decomposition system that's teeming with microbial life. I used a combination of good compost, worm castings, and actively aerated compost tea to create an environment so biologically active, it would make a microbiologist weep with joy. Here's what I did specifically. I took my biochar, which I'd purchased pre-made from a reputable source, and mixed it with high-quality compost at a ratio of about 1 part biochar to 2 parts compost. Then I added a generous helping of worm castings, probably another half part, to the biochar amount. The worm castings are crucial because they're loaded with beneficial bacteria, fungi, and enzymes that kick the whole biological process into high gear. But I didn't stop there. Every few days I drenched this mixture with actively aerated compost tea. If you've been following Roothaven Grounds for a while, you know I'm a huge fan of compost tea, and this is one of its best applications. I'd brew a batch using quality compost, a bit of molasses to feed the microbes, and a fish hydrolysate for extra nutrients, then bubble it with an aquarium pump for 24 hours. The result was a liquid absolutely teeming with beneficial organisms. I let this whole mixture sit for about 4 weeks, turning it every few days, and keeping it moist but not waterlogged. The temperature rose noticeably in the center of the pile, indicating intense microbial activity. What was happening during this time was that the biochar was becoming inoculated with billions of beneficial microorganisms, while simultaneously absorbing nutrients from the compost and worm castings. Okay, so let me break down what's actually happening at a microscopic level, because understanding this will really help you optimize your own charging process. The porous structure of biochar provides an incredible amount of surface area. Just 1 gram of biochar can have a surface area of several hundred square meters when you account for all those tiny pores and channels. Now, when you introduce this structure to a biologically active environment like our reactor, several things happen at once. Beneficial bacteria and fungi start to colonize those pores, creating protected microhabitats where they can thrive away from predators and environmental stresses. These microorganisms form complex communities with different species occupying different niches within the biochar structure. At the same time, the biochar is absorbing nutrients from the compost and worm castings. These nutrients get locked into the porous structure, creating a slow-release fertilizer effect. But, it's not just about nutrient storage. The microbial communities living in the biochar actually help make nutrients more available to plants through various biochemical processes. Some bacteria fix nitrogen from the air, while others solubilize phosphorus that would otherwise be locked up in the soil. And fungi, well, they extend the root zone of plants through their hyphal networks. The biochar also helps retain water in the soil while improving drainage, which sounds kind of contradictory, but actually makes perfect sense once you understand the mechanism. The pores hold water like tiny reservoirs while the overall structure improves soil tilth and prevents compaction. This means your plants have access to consistent moisture without the risk of waterlogged roots. Let me walk you through setting up your own biological reactor for charging biochar because I want you to experience these same incredible results. Start by sourcing quality biochar. You can make your own if you have the setup, but honestly, buying from a reputable supplier ensures you're getting a product with the right particle size and pore structure for soil application. For your reactor, you'll need a container or pile location where you can mix and monitor your materials. I used a large plastic tote with holes drilled in the sides for aeration, but you could also create a pile directly on the ground if you prefer. The key is being able to keep the mixture contained while allowing airflow. Mix your biochar with good compost. I can't stress enough how important compost quality is here. You want compost that's fully finished, with an earthy smell and a crumbly texture. Avoid anything that smells ammonia-like or is still hot from active decomposition. Add your worm castings, and if you can get your hands on some mycorrhizal inoculant, throw that in too for extra fungal diversity. The moisture level should be like a wrung-out sponge. Too dry and microbial activity slows down. Too wet and you risk creating anaerobic conditions that favor the wrong kinds of bacteria. I check mine by squeezing a handful. If a drop or two of water comes out, it's perfect. Over the next few weeks, turn your mixture regularly and keep it moist. If you have compost tea, apply it weekly. If not, you can use a simple mixture of water with a tablespoon of molasses dissolved in it to feed the microbes. The molasses provide simple sugars that fuel bacterial growth. When your biochar is fully charged, you'll notice it looks and feels different from when you started. It should be darker, slightly sticky from all the microbial activity, and have an earthy, rich smell. This is your sign that it's ready to transform your garden. For established beds, I work the charged biochar into the top few inches of soil. You don't need massive amounts, really. I typically apply about a half-inch layer across the bed surface and work it in. For new plantings, I mix it directly into the planting hole, making sure there's good contact with the root zone. The effects aren't instantaneous, but honestly, they're noticeable within weeks. What you're creating is a living soil system where nutrients cycle efficiently, beneficial microorganisms thrive, and plants can access everything they need exactly when they need it. The biochar acts as a hub for all this biological activity, persisting in your soil for decades or even centuries. I hope this deep dive into charged biochar has gotten you as excited as I am about the possibilities in your own garden. The combination of biochar's physical properties with the biological power of a good reactor system creates something truly special in the soil. Your plants will respond with vigor, health, and productivity that might just surprise you as much as it surprised me. If you found this information valuable, make sure to subscribe to Roothaven Grounds so you don't miss future videos and articles where I'll be diving even deeper into advanced soil building techniques. Share this with your fellow gardening friends who are always looking for that next level in their growing game. And, hey, drop a comment below telling me about your own experiences with biochar or any questions you have about the charging process. Let's keep this conversation growing, just like our gardens. Happy growing, and I'll see you in the next one.